First up, the numbers. Worse in the ACT, a bit better in Victoria and New South Wales, but don't pop the champagne just yet.
Is it possible that we have seen the peak?
Can I just say one day is not a trend.
Meanwhile, the state's 6 millionth vaccine dose was administered well ahead of schedule.
That equates to about 60% of our population across the state having at least one dose and around 32% of our population double dose.
And a carrot to entice the hesitant.
It's your choice if you don't, but we can say in the strongest possible terms, if you want to do certain things in the future, vaccination will be key as part of that process.
She's not the only one looking to the future. Yesterday, Scott Morrison implored Gladys's colleagues in WA and Queensland to embrace his reopening plan.
Otherwise, we stay in the cave forever. And that's not a sustainable solution.
I wonder if that was a reference to the beloved 2013 animated children's film, The Croods.
I really doubt that, mate.
You really need to see this.
Now, it's like that movie in The Croods. Some wanted to stay in the cave, and that young girl, she wanted to go out and live again and deal with the challenges of living in a different world. Well, COVID is a new different world.
See those bananas? Vaccines.
That's why it's so important, Mr. Speaker, that people stand up for the plan rather than standing in the way of the plan, Mr. Speaker.
But two of our top experts beg to differ.
There should be a low level of circulating virus, which there isn't. The other deal was that there may well be lockdowns when required. So it's not like lockdowns are going to disappear. They're just not.
If you release at high case numbers, your contact tracing is overwhelmed. You would certainly not release at 1,000 cases per day at 70% vaccine coverage in New South Wales because it would be quite horrific.
Hang on. Doesn't the cave collapse in the end, leaving the dad stranded and separating the family in horrific circumstances?
It's just a movie we'll eat.
Right now, it's crunch time for Australia. So will the PM's pandemic escape plan work out better for us than it did for the Croods?
I like the movie.
Amy Ramekis is a political reporter with The Guardian and joins us now. First things first, Amy, how good is The Croods?
I mean, if we're talking Nicolas Cage movies, it's probably not the one I would have gone with. I probably would have gone with Face Off or Con Air, but each to their own, I suppose.
I'm just trying to figure out how you develop a pandemic strategy out of Con Air.
I probably a lot easier than you would out of, a prehistoric family living inside a cave who are forced to leave it and then find a fertile land. But you know what? I don't have the brains of the Prime Minister. That's why I'm on this side of the screen.
Clearly that is the case. But while we're talking about the brains of the Prime Minister, something has really shifted in his understanding of the politics. Like, he's really putting a lot of pressure now on the states to get to that moment where we just live with risk and we open up. What do you think has changed?
Well, the national plan has changed because the Doherty Institute modelling has come out, and I think it's fair to say that the Prime Minister has never been a huge fan of lockdowns in the first place. I mean, it was only in May 2020 that he was telling us that we had to get out from under the doona. So this is just a continuation of this theme. So the Doherty Institute analysis has given him all of the framework he needs to say that, yes, it is time for Australia to switch up its mindset and start looking at a time where we start living with COVID or getting out of the cave, as the analogy now is.
But Amy, he can say that all he wants. He can't actually force the states to sign up. So what's his strategy here?
I think his strategy is try to convince the states' populations that this is something that they want and that it'll be the population and the voters who really start forcing the state premiers to try and move them across the line. So really, every time he speaks at the moment, he's speaking to everybody out there, to all of you, and just sort of saying, how do you want to live? The question is, what are Australians willing to accept? What level of hospitalisation, what level of infection, and what level of death as we go through that transition?
So that'll be easy in Sydney and Melbourne. Can you envisage, like, WA being closed-bordered forever and it effectively becoming a different country while the rest of the country opens up?
I wouldn't be surprised if WA has managed to become its own country in the last 18 months and none of us really noticed because we've been focused on what's been happening on the East Coast. But it is easier in states like New South Wales and Victoria that have dealt with lockdowns in a way that the rest of the country hasn't really had to experience. That's why their vaccination rates are so much higher. It's because they've seen the damage that can be done in states like Western Australia, like Queensland, like South Australia, like Tasmania. You haven't seen those same outbreaks. And so people are kind of a little happier just to sit back and say, oh no, we'll wait until, we're all vaccinated. That's going to be the issue. I don't think we can do this forever. I also don't think it's going to be easy as just switching a switch and us all coming out of the cave by Christmas.
We're back at the Croods. Amy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Obviously, the big question is when we are going to open up. And it was really interesting listening to Scott Morrison's comments a few days ago, because he said whether we open up at tens of cases or hundreds of cases, it doesn't really matter. We're going to reach the same point. Obviously, the premiers didn't like that very much, but it was really interesting hearing the Doherty Institute actually back that up yesterday.
Well, it's their modelling too.
It's absolutely theirs. Yeah. But I think we'll all do well to remember that sure, we may open up hundreds of cases, but what matters is what our trajectory is of cases at that point. So if we're at 69% vaccination and cases are trending down, even if you've got 200-300 cases, that's one thing. But if those cases are heading up, and this is what we've attained with contact tracing during a lockdown, you can't just open up and expect you're going to have good control at all.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of Christmas, because I think politically, Christmas is a real marker for both the government going into an election year and for all of us who feel, in Sydney, for starters, there are a lot of people who couldn't get together with families last Christmas. And so 2 Christmases in a row, I think, is going to be a bit much for people to take if lockdown is still happening.
Yeah. From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.